Let's cross back to Canberra now, back to the nation's capital, and catch up with the former Nationals leader, former Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce. Thanks for joining us, Barnaby. Good to catch up again.
You're welcome, Chris. One
of the issues that you've been highlighting lately is this dairy takeover. A Chinese company, Mengniu, looking at taking over a whole bunch of Australian brands. It's been approved by the ACCC on competition grounds. What are your concerns about it?
Yeah, my concerns are that a part of your industry being foreign-owned is not a concern, but when you get in excess of 70% that's foreign-owned, you're starting to have a large section of your capacity and your own domestic control taken away, and especially if you have the involvement of another nation's government. And that is always the case with Chinese companies. They say they're not, but they have an advising body that they must get things passed to invest in Australia, and many of the organisations actually have a role or a strong role of the state in their actual operation and ownership. And that means the mechanism of price in Australia becomes determined by the whims of those overseas. We've got many problems in dairy in Australia as it speaks. We are losing dairy farmers hand over fist. We are really putting under pressure our capacity to produce fresh milk for consumers. So you might in the future end up down the path of reconstituted milk, and reconstituted milk as a dry product can come from anywhere in the world. And if you've got a large section of your industry operated by multinational or basically part state-owned organisations, then the capacity to supply a market can be done so easily with dry product from any corner of the world. So you can bring dry product in from Brazil and reconstitute in Australia, and and people say, well, that's the market. I think you get to a point you say, well, no, that's not. That's actually becomes an affliction on our capacity, on our own sovereignty, our own capacity to deliver to our own people our own milk. And, we want to make sure that overwhelmingly the Australian industry is Australian-owned.
Yeah, look, I've always been a strong defender of foreign investment. I've been pretty relaxed about it. The land that the overseas interests buy, for instance, they can't take away from Australia. And, of course, if there's a dairy companies involved, they generate jobs and wealth here. But I think those points you make now are very pertinent. And what we're seeing in the current crisis, of course, with coronavirus, that there can be competing demands between China and other countries and Australia. People sending some products offshore. So I suppose the concern could be with something like this dairy industry, where people are facing the problem of coronavirus. The demand might be high for that product both in Australia and overseas, and we might be worried about who wins out.
Yeah, and that's correct. Look, I'll take on a couple of those points there. The coronavirus is an overreaction, but you need a reaction nonetheless. What it is showing, though, it's testing the process and shows that really what is a sort of a substantial issue, but it's not the Black Death and it's not Spanish influenza, can have a massive effect on how trade works. And so we should be alive to the reality and not, models are great. Models are great, but they predominantly should be left on the catwalks of Milan. Once you get away from that, you have a thing called reality, and reality works in a vastly different paradigm, and you're starting to see a bit of it now. And that means you have to have a more precautionary process to how your own economy can be resilient against issues that might arise. And another nation's view on where products should go will be determined by that other nation's government, because they are answerable to their own people. And, the reality is China is bigger and uglier than us and stronger. And, if they decide to make a decision, we've got to have a reality check about what our capacity is to disagree with it. Now, going back to the issue of you can't take the land with you, I agree, you can't. But you can certainly have the overwhelming interest and exploit that land no matter where it is, and that's what Britain did with India. They never took India back to Portsmouth. It managed to get a lot of wealth out of India, and the Dutch certainly never took Indonesia back to Holland, but they certainly managed to exploit it for its wealth. Or the Belgians never took the Congo back to Belgium, but they managed to exploit it for its wealth. So it's a and of course the Romans never took Egypt back to Rome, but they certainly needed it for their wheat. So it's a well and tried process of how you don't have to take the land with you, but by God, you can certainly exploit the wealth of it to the detriment of the people who live there.
Indeed. We'll keep an eye on this this dairy one, the Mengniu dairy business. Farmers Unionise iced coffee, the greatest pick-me-up drink in the country. We don't want that disappearing. Now, I want to get you on to, you mentioned coronavirus and the economic impact here.
Yes.
We're waiting to see what the stimulus package will be. What's your pitch? Where would you be looking to encourage your own government to spend money quickly that will both be a stimulus for the economy but deliver some long-term economic benefit?
Well, the first thing I'd do is I'd stimulate CSL to go forward and develop a vaccine as quickly as possible, because there's a great benefit to Australia if we do that, both in the health of the world and also monetary benefit to CSL shareholders, which I'll now disclose I am not one, but my son is one. And I think it's also important that we certainly invest in just the basic sanitary requirements in buildings. I think most buildings now, you should have a hand sanitizer as you walk in and as you walk around, like hospitals do, to try and give the community a sense of confidence that we are hard at work, minimising, we can never remove, minimising and mitigating against the effect of the spread of this disease. As far as what part of the economy you stimulate, well, it's the part of the economy that's affected, and if that is, you know, if that's will be anywhere that relies on the congregation of people, I imagine. Now that will sort of filter through as we see this disease. It will ramp up, and it'll ramp up in Australia over the next few months. But it is not going to be the Black Death. It's not going to be Spanish influenza. A lot of people are going to get it, not even know they have it. But it is certainly more virulent than the flu. So you've got to be cautious, you've got to be aware, but there's no point in panicking, because that achieves nothing. Absolutely.
We've got to talk down that panic, and that's a key point you make. From all the evidence, a lot of people will have it and not even really know. It'll be just a cold-like symptoms. Just finally, Barnaby Joyce, if I could
just
ask
add
you to
one
put
thing
on
in
your...
there?
Sure.
Can I just add one thing in there? It's really important. Of all the cases that have been in the world in coronavirus, and I think there's about 95,000 now, not one child under the age of 9 has died. So that is an important fact to get out there, just so we get some mitigants into the hysteria there.
Yeah, it's a very reassuring fact, and someone must be putting it out there, because my 6-year-old was boasting to me the other day that he was going to be okay. He said, it's only you old blokes who need to worry. Now, just briefly, I want you to put on your meteorologist and agronomist hat. Give us a bit of an update on the drought. These rains have been pretty widespread, pretty heavy. Can we see the end of the drought now?
Look, yes, I think it's fair enough to say can. There are certain areas and certain catchments that need more rain to fill up their dams, but you've got to be fair with your analysis. And overwhelmingly in the eastern part of Australia, we've had massive rains in areas. You know, we've got water going through St George, I think, at about 250,000 megs a day, 250 gigs, around about there. Obviously, that would fill up Sydney Harbour every couple of days. So, you know, we've had good rain, and even around where I've got a place, you know, we've had good rain, and it continues to rain. We had more rain in the first month than we had in the previous year. I suppose that is part. You know, for my part, you know, I believe in a higher authority, and I think that's, you know, come to fruition. We always get doom and gloom merchants no matter what happens. You get a drought, they say the drought's going to be with us forever and we're going to turn into Syria or something like that.
Are you saying God has bailed us out here?
Well, I have a belief that we didn't come here by chance, that you're not there by chance, that if you go through all the combinations and permutations of facts and figures and the probabilities of you being there and me being here and saying it was just coincidence, then I believe that if that's the case, you go from the Big Bang to the Planck epoch to the galactic epoch to things evolving from the primordial soup and crawling out, and then the involvement of that being into two sentient people being opposite each other via a television and talking sense and say, well, that was just coincidence. Well, that's a number that I can't comprehend. But if that is the case, then stand outside an oven and throw in some flowers, some chocolate, some candles, a mix master, randomly turn them on and see if you can make a birthday cake.
This is brilliant. Now, we're getting the big issues sorted here, and there's plenty there to think about. But I suppose the corollary of that is, are you saying that the prayers across this nation have helped bring these rains?
Well, look, I'm entitled to my belief structure, and I'm not going to be intimidated out of my belief structure. It's what I have a belief in, and it's not a belief that others hold, but I'm not going to be intimidated and bullied out to my belief, because I see so many things around here that I think are overwhelmingly on belief structures and not science.
Indeed, Barnaby Joyce. Well, thanks so much for joining us again and sharing those thoughts. Catch you next time.